All this and your girlfriend is still gonna cheat on you. Despite what every single piece of media over the last 20 years has psyoped you into thinking, the single most important person in the entire military, of every military, in the history of militaries, is literally this guy. Yes, this guy. It ain't Navy SEALs, it's not Delta Force, Green Berets, PJs, Rangers, or CIA whatever. The most important person in the entire military is the standard infantry grunt. 11 series, the like and subscribe button, and let's talk about it. There is a famous saying that says there are two sides of the military: infantry and infantry support. And being a former infantry guy myself, I am inclined to agree. But it's also just kind of true. And I don't mean that in a demeaning way to the non-infantry people. It's literally just how things are set up. Every bit of military tech we've created over the last 100 years, every plane, tank, and aircraft carrier we've built, every special forces operator or stealth fighter pilot we've trained, and every dollar of the trillions we've spent has been to give the average infantryman, a guy who signed up because he wanted a new Camaro, the best possible advantage on the ground. Now, before you get angry at me for saying that, allow me to explain myself. Stealth bombers are cool and sick and stuff, but you can't land one in an enemy capital and claim you just won the war. Secret squirrel operators are badass and the subject of every video game and war movie these days, but a squad of them can, at most, take and hold a single 2-story building. Boats are also very cool and do a lot of cool and scary things. But nations exist on land, at least the nations that the global elites allow us to know about. If you want to take and hold a piece of dirt controlled by another nation and claim that your own nation controls it, you need to put a dude with a rifle on that piece of dirt, even if said dude has to use his finger while reading. Before I talk about things like tanks, artillery, or airplanes, I want to talk about why special forces, Delta, Ranger, SEAL, Sniper operators don't win a war, but a guy who has 2 divorces before turning 23 does. And that is an important distinction to make here. I am talking about wars, 2 or more countries with militaries duking it out. I'll talk about all the other stuff those guys do later in the video, but for now we're going to keep it simple and straightforward. And by that I mean talk about something completely unrelated real quick. Now, I talk about a lot of crazy military stuff on this channel, and a lot of said military stuff is dangerous. That's kind of the whole point of militaries existing. But the real world can be just as dangerous, and that danger can lead to some not so stellar outcomes if your goal is to be an uninjured human person. But if you fail to keep your health at 100% for one reason or another, that brings us to today's sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. There's a reason why protective gear exists in combat, just like there's a reason why Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury law firm. With 1,000 attorneys in all 50 states, they've won over $30 billion for their clients. With a track record going back over 35 years, they know a thing or two about fighting for the compensation you deserve. If you have the unfortunate chance to be injured by someone else's negligence, just know that you deserve to be paid. You only pay if they win your case. So if you end up working with them, they'll do everything they can to fight on your behalf. If you or someone else you know is dealing with an injury that was someone else's fault, you can check out Morgan & Morgan today by going to forthepeople.com/Taylor. Thank you to Morgan & Morgan for sponsoring the channel, and now back to the video. We tend to think of special operators, regardless of what kind they are, as sort of real-life super soldiers, and in certain ways they are. They get the best training, the best gear, and are on average better than your standard soldier in basically every metric of warfighting, with 2 very important exceptions. They are very, very, very expensive, but more importantly, they're very few in number. If you look at the official American SOF website, it states the 5 most important facts about special operation forces. 3 of them say that special operators are few in number, and the last one literally says they need help from normal grunts to accomplish their mission. The unofficial 6th one is just a link to an Amazon wish list to make buying podcast gear simpler. Special operators are scalpels. They're very good at performing very hard, precise, and very risky missions in places that are difficult to be in. But you can't exactly break a brick wall down with a scalpel. You kinda need a sledgehammer for that. They can land on a rooftop and raid an enemy headquarters, but they can't take the town it's sitting in. They can ambush an enemy patrol in the woods at night, but they can't hold the 100-mile-long defensive line the patrol was heading towards. They can even call in an airstrike behind enemy lines and wipe out a company of armored vehicles sitting somewhere, but they can't wipe out the entire battalion, brigade, or division. You get the point. A lot of war is just a game of numbers, like that much, at least. At the end of the day, you need a literal army's worth and ideally multiple armies worth of just standard grunts to take over entire cities, countrysides, coastlines. You get what I'm saying here. There's a reason that D-Day in World War II looked like this and not like this. Could a platoon's worth of Green Berets defend a hill against a dedicated attack? Yeah, probably, and they'd probably be really good at it, but that is a waste of manpower. You're better off sending them off to take out some AA battery or blow up high-value targets with C4 bricks. That is where you get the literal bang for your metaphorical buck. It's also worth mentioning that soft teams are incredibly vulnerable. If you put a lone Delta Force squad with decades of experience and training against a single tank 1,000 meters away, the tank is probably going to win 9 times out of 10. Obviously, that is an unrealistic scenario, and they're probably smart enough to stay out of that kind of fight, but it illustrates my point. Operator people are set up to take on very, very specific targets, and since they typically do stuff either on foot or occasionally out of light vehicles, they're not going toe-to-toe against the heavy stuff. And it just so happens, though, that most armies do have a lot of the heavy stuff. We all love to oogle at those Humvees with a bajillion machine guns sticking out, or my personal favorite, the Desert Patrol vehicle. But one strafe from an old Soviet BMP turret, and it's game over. And also the BMP guy is probably going to get a medal for that, so it's going to sting a little extra too. Most of the specialized weapons they carry aren't there because they're inherently better than the ones normal troops carry around. They're usually just more flexible or reliable ones that let them maintain firepower and maneuverability within small teams. But usually against human targets, not anything on tracks or wheels that has any kind of armor. They usually have to call in help for that kind of thing. And no, they're not going to just go full send on it with smoke grenades and C4 bricks, even though that would be fucking sick. Looking at things like when Delta flew in on black helicopters and stole Maduro without a single issue might give you the wrong idea of how these guys would operate in an actual war. The US deployed an entire carrier strike group, Air Force squadrons, and an army's worth of logistic and intelligence groups just to support that one team for the 2.5 hours it took for them to accomplish their mission. The US was able to do that because there wasn't anything else actually going on. So in a war where other things are actually going on, they wouldn't have that kind of luxury. I wonder how he's doing now. I haven't heard from Maduro in a while. Special operators in an actual wartime setting are like my ex's friend group. They are enablers. Man, I really need to go back to therapy. They do very difficult or complex things in support of the bigger picture. Navy SEALs will sneak onto a beach at night and pop out of the water just like it's in the movies. But that's so that Marine infantry know where to land in the morning and can take over an island faster. Delta Force will kick a door in and shoot some important bad guy general in the face, but that's so that it causes organizational disruption for when the army makes a big offensive push the next day. Green Berets will hunt for anti-air missile launchers and blow them up, so that when the poor grunts get bogged down somewhere a week later, they can actually call in air support and get out of the situation. Can Marines hit the beach without Navy SEALs? Yes. Could the Army make that big push without the Delta Force? Yes. Could a pinned-down infantry platoon eventually kill the thing shooting at it without air support? Yes, they could, but all of those things would be way harder, way more dangerous, and incur way more casualties if done that way. When the gears of war need a turn-in, special operators provide the lube. And could I have worded that better? Yes, I absolutely could have. It's kind of like having a stick-shift supercar for your daily driver. They are all very cool, impressive, and head-turning, but also super overkill and way too high maintenance to sit in morning traffic or fight for parking spots at Costco. It's also worth mentioning that we train up those guys on those skills because originally we didn't have any better way of doing it. And while that holds true for some mission sets, advances in technology and long-range munitions or assets have made a lot of those cool guy things we think about obsolete. We don't need to halo jump into hostile territory to kill a high-ranking official. We have drones armed with Hellfire missiles to do that for us. We don't need to send in operators to take out AA batteries because we have rounds that can hit them better and faster now from our own lines. And we don't need them to go deep inside enemy territory to conduct reconnaissance as much because we have drones that can do it better in most scenarios. The reality is, outside of the most surgical and politically sensitive operations, a drone, missile, or even a computer virus can do many of those things better, faster, and not put American lives at risk. I originally put human lives at risk there, but then I remembered the whole goal, in fact, is to put human lives at risk, just not our human lives. Remember, kids, you win a war by making other people die for their country. Now, again, we are talking about actual war here, large-scale combat operation stuff. So just keep that in mind before you get mad at me, please, because I emotionally cannot handle people being mad at me. When I say actual wars, I mean the ones with the big arrows at press briefings. They need a ton of people. And if you want those arrows to move closer to an enemy capital, you need an army of grunts that have the sheer numbers and training to make that happen. But what about other things like artillery, bombs, or missiles? Those are all very good at vaporizing the cowardly enemies of freedom and democracy. So why can't they win wars on their own? Isn't running down the tickets how you win battlefield conquest games? Well, yes, but now I need to make a distinction between two important ideas: fires and maneuvers. Fires are higher level things that do bad stuff to bad guys, and usually from a distance. It could be blowing them up with artillery, it could be dropping bombs on them, it could even be jamming their radios or blasting them with really loud music. Maneuver, on the other hand, are your tanks, infantry, and the other on-the-ground dudes who are the ones actually at the very front achieving objectives. It could be seizing a hilltop, defending a city block, or just generally moving towards the enemy and pushing their lines back. Fires enable maneuver. In a perfect world, you would never have one without the other. However, that's not always the case. But even if you drop so much ordnance on an objective that it just turns into a parking lot, you still have to physically put people there with gap pieces if you want to say you own it. If you look at official military doctrine, everything that they do has two core components: a task and a purpose. And that might sound familiar to you if you're up to date on your MilTube internet lore. The task is what you physically do, and the purpose is just that. It's the why. The why portion is the actual goal, and the more important of the two. An example could be to attack an enemy on Hill A in order to destroy enemies on the objective. But here is where nuance is important. If you destroy something doctrinally, that is a literal phrase. There are no enemies, alive at least, on Hill A anymore. If you blow up a bunch of people on Hill A, and that's it, odds are they're probably just gonna either go back or just go to Hill B right next to it. And now you have another problem to deal with. Just schwacking the bad guys did not actually achieve the bigger purpose of the mission in the first place. All the missions that grunts get are nested, as it's called, within higher ones. That's just a fancy way of saying that the smaller missions are done to achieve the bigger, overarching ones. Those higher missions are usually the ones like push country X back over the border, or force country Y to surrender. And you do that by taking over enemy territory. There are some exceptions to this, obviously, like blowing up a mortar pit with your own mortars instead of sending infantry guys to go do it. But those are typically supporting operations, not the main ones. The military, and this might sound contradictory, does not just kill people for the sake of killing people. The lizard people in charge of the world do, but that's a different topic. The military does it in order to either set conditions for decisive operations or achieve the actual decisive operation itself. And 99.9999% of the time, a decisive operation, aka the one that actually achieves the main goal of the entire war in the first place, is to take and hold land that the other side was sitting on. It's pushing the lines in the direction you want them to go. Now, we have to get a little bit more into the weeds now, but not like too deep into the weeds. You know, too deep, like how I was with your mom. Under the maneuver category are more than just infantry dudes. The biggest and probably most confusing group under that, for what we're talking about, are tanks. Tanks in a general sense have the exact same kind of doctrinal mission set that the infantry do. Push forward, kill foreigners, and take over territory. The bread and butter of warfare, ever since we figured out how to put pointy rocks on the end of sticks. The problem is that tanks, despite all their wonderful, hulking, and oddly erotic qualities, are incredibly vulnerable without infantry support. They also perform their worst in dense urban settings, which is, unfortunately for them, where the most important war-winning objectives are. All that is also just ignoring the fact that in the Russian-Ukraine war, vehicles at the front have been all but abandoned in favor of small teams of infantry for the attack and defense. When being detected at all means you just got a countdown timer for the short time you have left on this earth, things bigger than human-sized targets are struggling to keep pace with advances in technology. Now, before you hurl the what ifs and what abouts, I want to cover why only actual infantry grunts can do the job of taking and holding ground, the things that win the wars. And it's mostly because that's their only job. When it comes to other combat-related jobs, it's not that they're just infantry-style dudes with specialized gear like combat engineers carrying explosive charges around. A lot of it comes down to roles and responsibilities. If we stick with combat engineers for this example, that are usually sent in with or even ahead of the infantry, they have two main jobs if you really boil it down. Make it so that our guys can get from A to B, and make it so that the bad guys can't get from A to B. Are they able to perform the specific jobs of the infantry? Yes, absolutely. But again, it comes down to that not being the best way to use them. Military units only have so much time and funding for training, so it's best to leverage troops in the specialty areas that they have the most training in. Yes, the finance soldiers we have are in fact capable of loading and firing a rifle while pointed in a general direction, but in the same way I don't want a grunt handling complex spreadsheets with lots of numbers on them, I don't want the finance guy trying to clear trenches. One of my best friends is an army doctor, and I always told him that if he ever had to pick up a rifle and go fight, I had probably died years ago in some European bunker, and he was leading the American resistance forces in the Rocky Mountains probably. That's obviously an extreme example, and certain jobs do have a lot of operational overlap, like how scouts, engineers, artillery crews, and all infantry all ride around in the same, or mostly same, model of Bradley. But they're all organized differently. Infantry units, regardless of branch or kind, are organized with pure ground fighting in mind. Units like scouts or engineers might look visually identical, but how they're trained, set up, and equipped are for other kinds of tasks. That was especially confusing in the GWOT, where some troops like artillerymen literally didn't even bring their howitzers and just operated as infantry, but that was largely because infantry were needed more rather than big gun that go boom. Not that big gun that go boom isn't important, just sometimes other things are more importanter. Now, there are two more points I want to make that might clear up any leftover confusion or prevent angry comments. One is that infantry need everyone else in the military supporting them in order to do their job. About 85% of the entire US military is made up of non-combat support personnel. There are times where infantry units are sent in unsupported, like airfield seizures, but the length of time they have zero help is kept as short as humanly possible. The top priority in those situations is to bring in reinforcements. Bullets don't fly without supplies, the Pogues love to say, but they are correct. Plus, sometimes there are certain missions that aren't just hard for the infantry, but literally impossible without external support, like performing a big obstacle breach or a beach landing. And the second point I want to make that kind of points towards the future of where all this is going is where drones fit into all of this. As of me writing this video, drones are just another form of fires. An effective form of fires, but still fires nonetheless. They are basically flying mortars in the simplest of terms. As I've said in other videos, making a drone go on the ground is a lot harder than making it fly. Ground more harder than sky, at least in terms of building something that can traverse and survive it effectively. UGVs, or unmanned ground vehicles, are the next evolution of things. Yes, they can carry heavier weapons than humans and theoretically have better optics and networking capabilities, but they still can't effectively take and hold ground, at least not yet. Even according to the latest American hopes for future robot soldiers, they're supporting or scouting elements. They lack the ability to handle the really hard stuff as it stands now, and for the foreseeable future at least. Drones can kill, but they can't take and hold territory on their own from start to finish at the moment. Eventually, that will change, but we are a long way off from that, if we ever actually get there. Drones have yet to make the shift from the fire side of the military to the maneuver side of the military. But when they do, hopefully I will be dead already because that is not a world I want to live in. Unfortunately, 30 is the new 20, so odds are I will still be alive then, at least if I can keep the intrusive thoughts at bay. But on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please subscribe and I will see you in the next one.